Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 65 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
It's the first time in a while we're doing almost back-to-back recording sessions for the podcast, and it's been too long. Now, ironically, none of the episodes that we've been doing this back-to-back for are about the Kaseki series, but details, details, details.
That's right. I mean, I think that's almost why we can do this back to back. This episode is a we're talking about our life throughout this past year. You know, what kind of games we were playing, what our highlights of the year were, what our goals are for next year, both for podcast, both for gaming, and also for us ourselves as individuals. So, Kevin, uh, why don't you tell us a little bit about what this episode's going to look like?
Yeah, so we'll talk about the games that we played, some of the games that were pretty memorable or that we especially liked. Though if you have any that you really disliked, I would love to hear it. Talk about, moments within the games that really stood out one way or the other. And then, what did we do and play in 2023 and what do we want to do and play games, challenges for 2024.
That last part, I'm really excited about the game challenge for 2024 because, believe it or not, I am going to fulfill my obligation about Planescape Torment by the end of this year. And then we have a new challenge coming up that I think will be even more fun.
I just want to put it out there that for Colin's game, we set the challenge in March and recorded the episode in April.
And I am leaving it to the last moment. And I look, it's a part of it was just difficulty balancing things. It was always the one thing that I could push forward. But then also, I even said that I don't like being told what to do. So I had to work through that, which I understand is a personal problem, right? That's my fault. But what's going to be nice is finally finishing it and then being able to play what I want without fear of nagging responsibility up until we immediately make a new game challenge for ourselves.
So the moral of the story is Colin gets to assign all the games he wants.
Yeah. I mean, you liked Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, didn't you?
I did, and I gotta be honest, replaying Planescape Torment, it's a good game, it's a good narrative. The actual game kind of sucks.
It does. I mean, I'm looking
I
forward
think
to
I
going
should have
home.
done something different.
I'm looking forward to going home after we record this so I can play more because, I mean, I've set it to make the combat almost completely inconsequential, which I think you have to do to enjoy that game. And so I'm getting into some of the narrative bits that I like, but I will say that right now the gameplay loop of Planescape Torment is running around, and then the nameless one goes, updated my journal, and then you keep running around, and that's the game.
Yeah, I think I should have done Baldur's Gate 2, or maybe KOTOR 2 with the restoration mod, so you could finally understand why I call it the greatest RPG of all time.
I mean, I've played KOTOR 2 before, and I would be happy playing it again, but let's talk about Game Challenge at the end of the episode because I think we have a pretty interesting take on it for our next year. Kevin, what have you been playing?
So I've played as in I'm only going to count, games I started and finished that I have not done before this year,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of, games that most of them I've talked about on previous episodes about, why I like them and so forth. So what new games have we started, or I started and completed? Two of them will be the same as yours. First, Trails the Third. We started, completed that in the, late winter, spring. Ys Sora no Kiseki and Baldur's Gate 3. I have a couple playthroughs and accidentally deleted my most recent one, so I am become the funny clown.
So, Kevin, I want you to talk to me a bit about Baldur's Gate 3 because, I mean, the Game Awards were a couple of days ago. Baldur's Gate 3 won almost every single category that it was in, including Game of the Year. I played like 20 minutes of it because I own it on PC. My desktop PC is shit now. I really need to at least put in some thermal paste again in order to speed it up. I just haven't done it. And on my Steam Deck, it looks like trash. And I didn't want to buy it on. Yeah,
Huh.
no, it looks bad on deck. I was going to play it on console, and then they announced that they're finally doing a physical edition. So I bought that, but I'm not going to play it until I get that. But you have put in hundreds of hours. What makes this game so compelling? Why is this game the best RPG? Why is it the game of the year?
The openness, the freedom to go where you want, do what you want within the confines of, I think, a pretty tight, well executed story. You see the your character emerge. You see it interact with a wonderfully written story, wonderfully written companions, NPCs. The choice to be good or bad. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's the perfect marriage of gameplay and story, I think, I've yet seen. It's the mechanics are great. Like I'm never bored in my 170 something hours of it. And playthroughs, items I've seen a lot of times, places, events. I don't skip through it. Even on the, fourth, fifth, third time, I listen to the dialogue. I don't, skip. It's hard to describe. Whenever you play it and finish it, we'll do an episode on it in detail, but it is the platonic ideal of an RPG. And that's one of my two gaming moments, the dawning realization of, wow, this is, you ascend a hill and you see that it's going to be good in the valley below. Like that dawning realization, this is a masterpiece.
So when I think of you and playing a game multiple times, I have to think of Fire Emblem Three Houses, because you've played every single route on that, like you really got into it. And I've tried to do that, and
Gone into it.
I
Past tense.
I get stuck because the first half of it is always the same, and it's too
Yes.
easy slash boring. With Baldur's Gate 3, I mean, you've played through this a couple of times now. I get the whole feeling of, well, the writing and the voice acting, everything's so compelling that it's fine to repeat, but how drastically different are these playthroughs?
They're pretty different in terms of race, class, actions. The game has been being patched, so there's new stuff. There was previously a companion you could only get by committing a massacre, being evil. They made it so you could get that companion now on a quote good playthrough. So that's a
Okay.
whole new companion quest lines. The difficulty, there's a wonderful gradient, a custom difficulties preset of there's a one life honor mode of if you die, if everyone dies, the game deletes your save.
I saw in that patch as well that they have like a tabletop-esque mode where you can like really minutely change a bunch
Yes,
of different stuff just to make it more fun for you, which I think is cool.
I have you have a party of four, and I have different companions for different playthroughs, different play styles. So, if you have a fighter, barbarian, cleric, and say a warlock, then next playthrough you would have, say, a druid, a thief, a paladin, and a cleric. Got to heal. It's a different play style, different banter, interactions.
So I get gameplay wise how it's different, but is the general plot line more or less the same?
Yeah, but what your companions think about your actions change. The companion quests that you do will be different depending on
Mhm.
who you party up with most. And I mean, I'm a pretty compulsive, obsessive guy. There's this, three fantasy word, different web novel that's like 3 million words. I first read it 2018, and I do a yearly reread. So,
Why?
12,000 pages.
Why?
It's one of
Why
the,
do you do this?
it's one of my favorite works of fiction I've yet read. There's another 3 million word web novel that I'm going to reread. You get new stuff, and I have such finicky high standards for fiction Kevin said, lying as if he did not read Shurajit fanfic. It's
all
hard
the
to
time.
find
I mean,
really good.
man, I walked into a seminar room with you at one point, and you told me that I had to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't think that your standards for fiction are the highest.
Oh, I think Buffy the Vampire Slayer is one of the most influential TV shows of the millennium. Honest to God,
Well, I can't really comment on that. You have told me that Baldur's Gate 3 is your favorite game of all time now.
I think it is. Yeah,
That's
it's
incredible.
lightning in a bottle. I don't know how to describe it without seeming overly gushing.
But like I also know you. You don't do that easily. Like my impression is that when you
I'm
get
kind of
into a new piece of
cynical.
media, you start out hating it and have to be convinced to like it.
Excuse you. But Baldur's Gate 3, I think, is one of the best. It's the platonic ideal of what a game should be. But one of my other crystallized gaming moments, all here with me for a long time, it's not really a game moment. It's a moment in the game. But I don't think it's a game moment. It's Stardor 15 that we had a live episode on in May from Trails the Third, Ven's backstory. But the more I think about it, it's the storytelling, the narrative aspect of just you are consuming almost a visual novel. It's more really lines, walls of text. What and it's giving meaning because of the game, because of what we've, playing with Ren as a character, as an antagonist. The actual moment itself, there's nothing interactive about it or playing or customizable. You will get the same text, the same images in the same order,
Yeah.
no matter what changes you make
Um,
playing through the game.
in order to stream it, we had to do it on YouTube because somehow my save file had borked my copy of the game and I couldn't launch it on Steam anymore.
Yeah. And it's two extremes of different sides of the spectrum of a gaming moment. And on retrospect, thinking out loud, I think it really does show how games can and should be art and interrogated, sometimes criticized as such, but such different experiences among the same class of quote video game end quote.
Totally. I think this, especially Starter 15, packs so much more of an emotional punch because Ren had become an established figure in our eyes. We fought against her. At that point, we've also used her as a party member. We've kind of seen her grow organically anyway, and then it just gives us this narrative gut punch that, unless you're completely heartless, it has to impact you. And we watched it with on the YouTube video with the voice mod, which the first time I had read it, I didn't have that. And the
No,
voice acting made it like 100 times worse. And worse in terms of better, if you know what I mean. Like it hit harder because of the voice acting.
it's it's art. It really is. Both Baldur's Gate 3, Trails the Third, and a whole slew of myriad games in between.
Yeah.
It makes you feel. And it's not what art does at its best, it makes you feel.
Makes you feel, makes you think.
I think that's a great criteria. And those two moments really did it for me. And what about you? What did you play? Is there anything that really made you feel, made you think?
Yeah, totally. So I have to say that this year, I think I've played by play here, I do indicate start to finish. There's a couple of games that I've
Yes.
started and then dropped for different life reasons. But this year I have played probably the least amount of games in almost a decade. Like I've only beaten 12 games this year. And for me, that's not a lot. And some of them were like really short games. Like I played at the beginning of the year, I played this indie puzzle platformer named Inside with my now roommate. It took us like two play sessions. So it's really short. It was good, don't get me wrong, but like that's one of the 12. Ys versus Sora no Kiseki is another one, and that took us like 3 hours each. So some of these are short games, but I did manage to find time to play some longer games that I really enjoyed. So first of all, my honorable mentions, shout outs got to go out to the two Yakuza games that I managed to play this year. I love the Yakuza series. Even at its lowest points, which I think I've just played through its lowest points, it's still phenomenal. Fantastic storytelling, amazing characters. It really makes you, I don't want to say makes you feel like a Yakuza. It doesn't, but it brings the city of Kamurocho to life. Um, and I do believe that Kazuma Kiryu is probably the most positive male exemplar of like what it is to be a good man that we have in video games. Perfect almost to a fault at times, to be sure, but we need more stuff like that in which issues of masculinity are treated, but in a positive way. You know, instead of just critiquing negative aspects, we can show the positive behaviors that men should exhibit. So I really got to give the Yakuza series credit for that. So I played 3 and 4 this year. Uh, I've already played Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, and Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is the seventh game of the series. So I still got to play 5. I want to replay 0. Then I want to play 6. I got to do 7 again. I got to do the side story, Gaiden. I want to play Ishin. And then next year we have fucking Like a Dragon 8 coming out. So I got a lot to catch up on, but I love the series. I've also played Final Fantasy 16, which ultimately was not one of my favorites this year, but it was a good game. It was a very good game, and I spent a lot of time with it.
And that's fine. I mean, having a good, solid game, it's the I don't know, meat and potatoes gaming.
Yeah,
Gotta have it. I mean, it's the veggies.
it's the veggies. But I mean, it's not even the veggies. Like these are also potatoes. You know, they're like, and not just potatoes. They're like my roasted potatoes that takes me a while to get through, but like they're delicious when you finally pull them out of the oven. Final Fantasy 16 suffers from some pacing issues, particularly in its side quests, where if you start off the game and you do the side quests, you think, wow, these are just wastes of time. There's great side quests in there. They're almost all towards the end, but the combat is really fun. I love Clive as a protagonist. Um, it deals with some interesting issues in terms of like self-sacrifice of fate. It starts off also dealing with issues of slavery. I think that issue gets kind of dropped as we keep going, but still tons of interesting stuff going on in this world. Very heavily influenced by Game of Thrones, uh, to the point where it's weird in that it starts off with this political story and ends with a love story slash kill god story, which is very reminiscent of like Final Fantasy VIII, which is not a game that I'm a big fan of, uh, especially in terms of its plot. But 16 pulls it off a lot better. They just announced and released DLC for it. I'm not going to go back to it right away. I got other stuff I want to do first, but this is a game that at some point in like a year or two, I'll probably replay with the DLC and then do my full playthrough. I also played Jedi Survivor, which is the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order. I think at the end of the day, in terms of plot pacing, Jedi Fallen Order was better. But in terms of pure gameplay, Jedi Survivor like takes the formula and then just increases it and adds some really important quality of life improvements like fast travel. Anybody who's played Jedi Fallen Order knows how fucking annoying it is to explore because you cannot just rapidly get to where you need to go. You have to go through an entire zone. There are shortcuts, but there's not enough. Uh, Jedi Survivor fixes that. It adds more variation in combat styles. It tries to add a more robust side quest system that ultimately I didn't find compelling enough to engage in that much, but it was still a great game. And I'm hoping that there's going to be a third sequel. But none of these are my game of the year. My game of the year is a game that I've been looking forward to for a long time. It's the first game that I've ever platinumed. I 100%ed this game. And it is Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I absolutely love this game. I mean, I love the first Marvel Spider-Man. I love Miles Morales. I'm probably going to replay Miles Morales over Christmas break if I have time because I'm literally going to be in the Bronx during Christmas where the game takes place. I think that'll be fun. Uh, I told my mom that I'm probably going to bring my OLED and my PS5 just so I can have it during Christmas. But Spider-Man 2 It won zero awards at the Game Awards, which is weird. In none of the awards that it lost did it was it cheated out of anything. The secret to Spider-Man 2's success is that it does everything well. Nothing like its story does not reach the heights of a Baldur's Gate 3, for instance, but it's still a great story. Its gameplay or combat doesn't reach the heights of another really super focused combat game, but it gets close. It does all of these things probably like to the A minus range. And if everything is A minus, then that combines to an A plus. The narrative is fantastic. The gameplay variations between playing both as Peter Parker and Miles Morales is astounding. Plus, the different ways that you can swap between like the symbiote suit and the normal suit, that adds enough variation too, where it never feels boring. Combat is a joy. Exploration, you're constantly driven to explore more. And I think that this game does have my favorite gaming moment of the year, which is there's a point in time. No, this is a spoiler. So if anybody wants to avoid Spider-Man 2 spoilers, then scrub through for like a minute or two. But there's a moment in which Mary Jane gets taken over by the symbiote. And in this version of the symbiote story, the symbiote exacerbates um, violent and impulsive and angry behavior. It amplifies negative emotions, but it doesn't create negative emotions. It just makes them more present. And so Mary Jane, she had broken up with Peter Parker, gets back with him at the end of the first game. They're living together, but much as happens all the time, Peter Parker ends up putting his job as Spider-Man over and beyond Mary Jane. It's also what's keeping him from keeping a steady job. So Mary Jane is supporting him financially, supporting him spiritually, emotionally, and not really getting the same in return. And so she gets taken over by the symbiote, and all of that pain and anguish comes out in a boss fight in which you're trying to like fight to get the symbiote off of Mary Jane. And you can both hear the extremes of this is all of the pent up anger and frustration that I have about you. And this is not who I am. I don't really mean it. Please, Peter, save me. Oh, God. Happening all at the same time. It's gut wrenching, especially since all the while that you're doing it, you're dodging attacks and you're trying to hit her so that you can get the symbiote off of her. Uh, I don't think that that's a boss fight I'm going to forget anytime soon. So that's definitely my favorite gaming moment.
So, a bit more about like how did it made you think and feel?
I mean, I'm not really sure how to answer that question other than to say that with the rawness of the voice actress combined
Mhm.
with the tension in the fight. I mean, you're having to focus on dodging everything. Meanwhile, you're hearing this character who you've learned to care for over the past three games let out this voice performance that's like it sounds as if you're actually having a heart-to-heart argument with a loved one. Like you can feel the
Mhm.
rawness in her voice. It's gut-wrenching in that way. Maybe not the same as Stardoor 15, but you can really feel the pain that Mary Jane was going through in that moment and the relief when the two of them reconcile and are able to join forces to defeat Venom together. Because then after that, we realized that Mary Jane is actually an integral part of the plan to beat Venom in her Mary Jane form, not as the symbiote. And it just narratively like all comes together at the end of. I can't really explain it without people having played it, but Spider-Man 2 is probably the best narrative that I've played in video games in a very long time, and I'm even including trails in that. It's short, to complete it took me 30 hours, but the pacing was astounding. It makes you feel all sorts of emotions, and it just leaves you wanting more. If they release DLC, I'm buying it like that, and I'm putting everything to the side so I can play more Spider-Man. I have to say, I've always been a big Spider-Man fanboy. The background on my phone is Spider-Man. It has been for the past 6 years. Uh, when my mom taught me what heaven was, she said it was paradise. And as a kid, I asked her, all right, if it's paradise, that means they have everything that I could want. So Do they have Spider-Man board games? And she told me yes. Now, how the fuck she knows that, I don't know. But like Spider-Man's important to me. And the fact that the video games coming out for him have been so high quality since the PS4 launched, it makes me so happy.
Yeah, I want to, watch the movies, play the games. I like Haley Steinfeld a lot. And she's like Gwen.
Yeah, in the animated ones. The Spider-Verse films are fantastic, and there's a little bit of interaction between Enter the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse with the PS4 Marvel games. They're acknowledged in both sets of media. You should play
Yeah.
Marvel Spider-Man, yeah, on your deck. My boy Vikram's been playing it, and apparently it runs really well on the deck. It looks pretty good, and it's fantastic. Even the first one.
Yeah, and to wrap up this section of the episode, the games we play, whether as a whole or specific moments or episodes, stay with us the way an episode in a TV show or a scene from a movie or a chapter or a passage from a novel, as rightly they should. It's the same kind of artistic expression.
All right, is that was that it?
That's it.
It sounded like you were making a transition, but I think that it is a transition because this podcast is about games. We talk a lot about games, but
Well, technically, it's about one series of games.
yeah, but like, come on, we talk about other stuff too, and that's part of what we like doing on this podcast. But we are not just gamers. We're human beings. We have lives, and especially this past year, life has gotten in the way of me dedicating the time that I wanted to on this podcast, just because I have to make other priorities. But we thought it would be a good idea to talk, reveal behind the curtain a little bit and talk about, what we've been doing this year. That's not gaming related. What are the big moments that we have been personally experiencing? So, Kevin, why don't you tell us a bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah, we are multifaceted, complex people. I'm a lover, I'm a fighter, I'm a smoker, I'm a midnight joker.
What do you smoke?
Oh, it's a song reference,
I
Colin.
know
Never mind.
I know
Okay.
that song, but like you don't smoke cigarettes or anything.
Well, okay, so what have I been up to? Not much. Trying to get a book published, A History of the Sahara Desert. Have a wonderful agent always pushing to, make it better, to improve. So hopefully 2024, one episode, I'll be like, oh yeah, by the way, I got a book contract with a big name publisher. Now to actually write the damn thing.
Right. I mean, you've been working on like sample chapters, on seeing how like the structure of the book can be changed. I I would tell you, I've been learning a lot watching you go through this process. I think that the concept of the agent contract is fascinating because, as you pointed out to me, you don't hire an agent. It's almost like an agent hires you, or picks you, and then the goal is, okay, the agent will sell your book to a publisher. He has a year to do it. If he fails, you don't owe anything. You just walk away from each other. Meanwhile, all the improvements he's been giving you, you get to keep, right? It's still your intellectual property. But if he does sell it, then he takes a cut of like, I don't know, however many sales or whatever. So that you're still getting paid for the book. It's nothing out of pocket for you. And now you've just made a relationship that will help you on your literary popular scholar career. It's almost like there's no risk to you other than wasting time if it's a bad agent, for instance.
No, he's a great agent, and if there's one thing I have in abundance, it is time.
Yeah, you seem to have a lot of time.
Yeah. And you became a doctor this year.
I did. I mean, Kevin has been a doctor for 1 year more than me. So we should be calling each other Dr. Bloomfield and Dr. Barons. But I finished my PhD this past year. You came up for the defense, and we had this nice little barbecue at our advisor's place after the fact, which was a lot of fun and a big surprise, I think, to both of us that he was doing it. But I mean, yeah, I'm a late antique historian. I'm a late Roman historian, bona fide. I wrote my dissertation on a guy named.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much good faith there is.
I did it. I did it in good faith. I didn't make up like bullshit arguments. I'm proud of the work that I did on my dissertation. I wrote a political biography of a guy named Orosius of Braga, which I guarantee nobody listening to this podcast would have heard of. The only person in the wild that I've met that knew who he was a priest at my friend's wedding, and it's only because he's a priest. This guy is a church figure, but I kind of take him and I reinvestigate his political activity and make him out to be way more important than people had given him credit for in the past. But what it's also done is opened up a research interest of mine. I've been really interested in this idea of state involvement with church affairs, of how the state gets involved in forming like church orthodoxy or promoting one bishop over the other. I've also lately been reading this book called Dictator's Handbook by Alistair Smith and Bruce Bueno de Mesquita, which is a really good introduction to authoritarian studies. And I think that there's a good avenue to go down, bringing authoritarian studies to the study of the late Roman emperor that I don't think has actually been done. And it, ironically, it's something that you've been pushing me to do for a while. Because when I was looking at church politics, I was using a lot of political science based off of democracy, because that's really where we're getting the study of like discourse manipulation, which was good for the churchy stuff. But for like the standpoint of the emperor, I think you were right to point me towards authoritarians.
Yeah, it's why political science studies of the antebellum and even some ways postbellum American South have really benefited from discourses on oligarchic, aristocratic, and hybrid regimes. It was not a functioning democracy.
No,
And the way you frame what you take as your prior assumption to a priori axioms completely changes the kind of questions you can ask. Not just the data, but what kind of questions are possible.
I mean, not just kind of questions that are possible, but also the way that you interpret the evidence that's in front of you. Like the questions that you can ask the evidence and then the different answers that come out of that. So, like, for instance, right now, I'm working on a paper. There's a papal schism in 419 between a guy named Boniface and a guy named Eulalius. I'm not going to get into all the minutiae here, but we know of it because of a series of letters preserved in the Collectio Avellana that allow us to see almost like the week by week decision making on the part of the imperial court, which is fascinating. And there's a point at which the sister of the emperor intervenes in the discussion and seems to throw her weight behind one candidate by introducing a moral argument before it had been legal, who was the one that is properly ordained. But then once Galla Placidia gets in there, it becomes, well, one bishop is led by ambition, and we need to pick the right one. And so much scholarly ink has been spilt on trying to figure out who she's backing, even though she doesn't say who she's backing, and then using that as a way to show Galla Placidia's early interest in politics. But because of my reading in political science, the more democratic stuff, but also I've been realizing the authoritarian stuff plays a role here too. I realized that it doesn't matter who she's picking. What we have to ask is, why is she introducing the moral argument at all? You know, why is she changing the discourse in this way? Especially since, while it starts off as a legal argument, the conflict ends with the Emperor Honorius deciding that Boniface should be pope on account of the moral argument. So, in my argument in the paper that I'm writing is that Galla Placidia lays the groundwork for other people who have received the imperial correspondence to be predisposed to accept the legitimacy of that suggestion. So it's actually an integral part of Honorius's bishop management, not just Galla Placidia trying to be a power player. Uh, so if we're talking about life goals, getting that paper out is one of those life goals. But what I find fascinating is that to me, like asking this kind of question seems natural, but nobody else has done it. Literally nobody else, at least not published.
Always, it's surprising that to see the path that have not been trod down in any kind of, hierarchical, stratified endeavor when opening a door to new questions in academia or a new type of game or a new genre or subgenre of novels. it makes you wonder in the aftermath, this is so freaking obvious.
Yeah, totally.
How? How?
Especially when you think about something as it's not like this is an obscure issue. Papal schisms have been talked about for
Let
1500 years.
me make an interjection on behalf of the people in our lovely audience who I'm sure when they're being just told that this is not an obscure issue about Boniface and Eulalius,
Okay, fair.
it is an obscure issue. You are correct in feeling it's obscure.
It is obscure. The letters were only discovered in like 1800s was when Gunther put together the critical edition of the Collectio Avellana. Either way, what I'm saying is the concept of papal politics is like pretty people have cared about that for millennia. And then I was sitting in my grandma's hospice room, realizing at that moment, oh, I've read everything about this topic that people have put out. Everything. The point that I'm making, nobody else has made before. And when you can get to that point, and I'm talking like you have to pour over German articles, French articles. There's a guy in Russian who wrote something that I can't read because I don't speak Russian, but he has an abstract that I managed to Google Translate into English so I can at least know what it says. He's not saying what I'm saying. Like when you get to that moment when you realize literally you know everything that people have written on this topic, and yet you still have something new to contribute. It kind of validates all of the work that you put into earning a PhD. It's one of the most intellectually fulfilling things that I've experienced.
Kind of validates, not totally, but nothing's perfect in life.
No, totally not. But let's talk about what else is not perfect in life, which is teaching and the balance problems that I have been having. So this past semester, I was teaching two classes, both of which were the same class on the fall of the Roman Empire. Tons of fun. These kids are great kids. They're writing research papers right now, so I have to read them in a week once they're due, and then get the grades in. But it's been really enjoyable seeing them like find topics that they're really interested in and diving deeper. Meanwhile, we're going through the narrative of the Roman Empire. But let me tell you that teaching two classes is exhausting, especially when you do what I did, which was realize halfway through all of the plans you've made for the course are not working, and I needed to change the entire course halfway through, which, while I'm glad I did it, takes a fuck ton amount of time. You take
It
the
does, but being able to see a problem and correct it is something a lot of instructors are totally incapable
Oh, totally.
of doing.
And in a way, it's almost like they're right to do so. And let me break that down. People go to universities to learn from their professors, right? They go to take classes. They pay a lot of money to take classes. So you would think that the people who are teaching the classes are incentivized to teach well, but that's not true. If you're in academia, the way that you're going to get a job is to put research out. Teaching gets in the way of doing research. Now, granted, there are some incentives to teach well. Teaching evaluations are asked by some jobs, not by all jobs. Not by the job that I got an interview for, not for many of the jobs that I applied for. What matters is your research. So a graduate student or even an early career person like you or me must spend as little time preparing or grading or teaching as possible so that we can actually do research. Of course, then there's the moral qualm because typically one cares about their students and wants them to do well. So then we decide to put time in anyway, which actively works against our career incentives. So sometimes over the course of this year, you guys have heard me say, I have a free weekend. Instead of playing trails, I need to go on campus and I need to research. I'm on campus right now. I'm probably not going to do research. I'm going to go home after this to play Planescape, but that's because the next week I have free open to do research. Uh, a lot of the time, the only times that we have to do the things that will actually advance our careers are things that we only have time to do outside of working hours because teaching can take so much time. So, the things that are going to get me a job are stuff that I'm doing Friday evenings or Saturdays or Sundays, not during 9 to 5, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So it's tough. And one of my goals for next year is to figure out a better balance. especially since I have to design a whole new course in a couple of weeks, which will be fun once I do it, but it's going to take a bit.
And you'll have to fit in the job stuff with something even more important.
Such as,
Colin, over the years we've known each other, you have made comments about my aversion to early games, about how I am shutting myself off from foundational elements of Western civilization, of the human experience.
I don't think I ever put it quite that far.
Well, that's how I remember it. But your prayers have been answered. I have been stopped on the road to Damascus. On my way to the NVIDIA store to buy up all the graphics cards I could find, I saw a blinding flash of light and I was told to go play retro classic RPGs because that is our 2024 game challenge, the early foundational games of gaming history.
So let's break down what this is. And I do want you to like talk a bit about the criteria that we're doing. But last year, we basically said, okay, I, Colin, will challenge Kevin to play one game, and then Kevin will challenge me to play one game. And these are games that we think the other one would like, that we want to talk about. So he picked Planescape Torment so that we could talk about the narrative. And I picked Fire Emblem Path of Radiance because the man kept calling himself a Fire Emblem game without playing an actual Fire Emblem game. And that needed to be rectified. Now, I got to be honest with you, Kevin. I don't remember if this episode actually went live because there was some audio issues around this time. The episode I think was a bit boring. We might have cut it, but the way that we did it last time was that I suggested a list of games, which then I went through and I explained here's why I would want Kevin to play it. And then Kevin had veto power. He could say, I'm not interested in this game. So, for instance, I suggested that he play Bug Fables. And he said, I want to play games with humans in it, not insects. So he vetoed Bug Fables. I was not allowed to pick Bug Fables.
And it's weird because I love Game of Thrones and the relationship that Cersei and Jaime have, but for some reason I don't like insect in other contexts.
Good one. So then, after going through all of that rigmarole, then I would pick a game, and that's the game that he would have to pick, vice versa. So, what we want to do is that for this game challenge, we have established a more smaller criteria, like an actual goal. This one will be about classic RPGs, which Kevin will describe what he's looking for. And I'm going to pick a game. He's going to pick a game through the same mechanics that we had just described. But also, we want you, the community, to pick a game. Over the next, I don't know, however many weeks, obviously after this episode goes live, which will go live next week, December 17th, 18th. We want people to submit suggestions through Twitter, email, direct messaging on Twitter, however you want to do it. We'll collect a list of all the suggestions. Kevin and I will make a short list of those games, maybe 4 or 5, host a poll on Twitter, and have all of you vote on it. And then the choice that wins the most votes becomes our community pick for the game challenge. But Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you have in mind when you say classic foundational RPGs? Like, what do you mean?
I mean, I say RPGs before Final Fantasy VII got released in the US because that feels like a watershed moment for the influence of RPG history in gaming. That game, especially. That's what, 96, 97.
Let's look that up. So, Final Fantasy VII, 97.
That's kind of arbitrary, but I just wanted games that, you know how people say Seinfeld isn't that funny because you see so much of it in comedy, but actually it introduced or created so many of the comedic foundational elements that are taken for granted these days. And if you watch Seinfeld, you really get a foundational television show for comedy. or the X-Files for serial television. And so I wanted something kind of similar for games, RPGs especially, but maybe not exclusively RPGs. If the community, or if calling this a, really foundational game in a different genre, I'd be happy to play that. Just a game where you can see, like, this game has influence on games today. If this game was not made, the entire picture would be radically different,
Okay.
if
So
that makes sense.
it does make sense, totally. I personally will probably choose an RPG for you. I think it might be better to close it off to RPGs, but that's a discussion that we can continue to have. And there are some great platformers there as well, but and just in terms of the things that we normally talk about, RPGs might be the best.
This is going to be out of my comfort zone. There's some parts of Planescape that replaying annoy the shit out of me, but I think it'll be important. It's good to get in touch with your roots to see how does something that we interact with. I'd say, at least for me, every day I either read about games or play about games, go on a subreddit, whatever. How did it come to be where it is? Why are we where we are?
Fair enough.
We're historians. We are interested in how the past for its own sake.
So one other thing that Kevin had made known to me, in terms of a criteria, is that if it's going to be a retro RPG, this doesn't really count if it's like a platformer or anything like that. But
Yeah, yeah.
if it's a retro RPG, he wants it to have a good story and they're still fun to play.
A story. Like, I know, I think you've said some of these really early RPGs paradoxically don't really have much of a coherent story.
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, it's difficult to really put where on the slider things can go. Traditionally speaking, we might say that Final Fantasy IV is the first RPG that really integrates like a story into the gameplay. That story is still kind of simplistic by modern standards, but compared to like Dragon Quest One or Final Fantasy One, then it's still better. Uh, Final Fantasy 3, I think you can make an argument for, but Final Fantasy 4 like has clearly fleshed out predetermined characters and stuff like that. Final Fantasy 2 does as well, but Final Fantasy 2 sucks and will not be accepted. Because he
And we'll
still wants
probably
probably
we
what?
will most likely have a sidebar episode to begin with, a sidebar episode where we talk about, what is a video game story, drawing on earlier literary theory conceptions of the story that date back to Aristotle to ground ourselves, like we did with the plot twist episode last week of the reversal and the recognition that I, for one, feel really situated us in discussing the plot twist in games.
Yeah, that was a really it's one of our shorter episodes, and I think that if we had thought about Aristotle before 5 minutes before the episode started to be recorded, it would have been even better. But I learned a lot doing that episode. So I think you might be right. Just having something on like what is a video game plot might be interesting. But okay, if you're thinking about what you want to recommend for us on this game challenge, games from the following systems are preferred, but then there's other stuff as well. So like the golden age of JRPGs is Super Famicom, Super Nintendo, and the PlayStation 1. Now, Kevin just said it should be games before Final Fantasy VII comes out. So the
I
PlayStation
mean, that's
don't
it's
get chip,
vague.
chip, chip, chip. We need firm deadlines. It's like I tell my students, deadlines are firm, even though I keep giving them extensions when they ask for it. But I'm not giving you all extensions. So Final Fantasy VII comes out January 1997. The PlayStation 1 comes out 1995. There's a couple of games that we know come before that, come before Final Fantasy VII. Xenogears is one. It's a game that I've played. Kevin has not played it. That might be one to suggest. I'm not planting anything. Personally, I don't really want to play Xenogears again, but if the community picks it, then we'll go for it. Super Nintendo has a ton of stuff on there, but also the PC Engine. PC Engine's very easily emulatable. I also have one, so we can do something on that. The Genesis or the Mega Drive, there are some RPGs on there. The NES, there's going to be RPGs on that too. That one's going to be a bit harder to find like good stories as well, but they exist, especially for some of the later Japanese only games. So, think broad, think interesting, and tell us what you want us to play.
Let us know on Twitter or email or whatever, any really good games that stuck with you in 2023 one way or the other, any moments that really made you think and feel, any games that really solidified, man, I love games. I like video games, interactive media. Let us know. We'd
Totally.
love to hear.
Kevin, we have one
Have a
last.
happy Christmas.
Hold on. We're not done yet. We got one last thing we got to say, which is the plan for the rest of December.
Yes.
The plan for the rest of December. Planescape Torment will be our next episode. We're releasing this episode a week from recording now. My goal is to beat this game by the end of next week. We're recording right now. I'm going to close the laptop. I'm going to go back home and I'm going to eat lunch and I'm going to play Planescape. And then I'm going to make dinner and I'm going to play Planescape. Playing Planescape all day. So I'll be updating my journal a lot. We're going to get this game done. We're going to talk about it. That's definitely happening. If possible, we want to end, and I guess probably also then start the new year with Chapter 4, Trails from Zero. That will be contingent upon how fast we can beat Planescape Torment, how much time we have to play through Chapter 4 before holiday travel begins. That being said, I'm also probably bringing my PS5 to my mom's. So there's the possibility even then that I can just finish it up there and then record while I'm at my mom's place. That'll also be dependent upon what Kevin is doing for holiday travel. I don't think you are traveling because you live close to your parents, and plus you're not a Christian. So I don't think you
I'm
care as
traveling
much about
four
Christmas.
miles.
You're traveling 4 miles.
I'm traveling 4 miles.
That's really
Yes.
rough, dude. I'm going to the city, so I'll be driving for 4 hours. Mm.
God, I hate that.
No,
The
it does
city.
suck.
The city.
Yeah, man, it's the city. Get over it. There are two cities in the world that we can call the city, and it's Rome and it's New York.
Isn't Istanbul literally one of them?
No, not anymore.
I mean, the name to the city.
I mean, I don't know what Istanbul means in.
You serious? It's Greek, Colin. Eastane, Poland.
Oh shit, no way. I knew like Constantinople was, the palace of Constantine, but I did not know that the Turks kept a Greek name, or really just said this is the city in Greek, even while they're all speaking Turkish. That's insane.
Like, did you not know this?
I mean, somebody told me that at some point, I'm sure, but I don't remember everything. I'm not perfect.
Well, I am.
You're not.
And December 11th, we just released last week the plot twist episode. December 18th,
Oh,
the
hold
day
up,
this
dude.
gets
No, no,
released,
no. Today is the 10th, and the Poetics episode went out today. So you can't say it
is
came out on the 11th.
the 10th. December 17th, this episode, this episode will come out December 17th.
Yes,
We may have Planescape Torment come out next week, the 24th, Christmas Eve. We will see. If not the 24th, the 31st.
definitely then the 31st. And then we'll get chapter 4 done after that. Aiming for the 31st. Maybe it goes January the 7th. We'll just have to wait and see. We'll also post more firm like deadlines and stuff for suggestions of community picks on Twitter or shitter as we might call it now with the X. When this episode goes live, by then we'll have decided when everything needs to be made known. We'll probably have a sidebar episode going through our picks and y'all's picks as well.
I'm looking forward to talking about Planescape Torment, to talking about Chapter 4. It's to the gaming challenge. I'm looking, it should be good. And I am prepared to eat a helping of crow about this game.
Well, Kevin, as always, it's a joy talking to you. I mean,
Joyeuse Noel.
take us out.
See you next time. I'm Kevin. That's Colin.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.